Hey guys, so this morning we are doing lesson 160, which is on interest by months. So we're still going to use the simple interest formula that we started using yesterday. And this is covering pages 289 and 290. But for a review before we get started on that, we're going to go over some formulas today. All right, so can you remember the formula from Fahrenheit to Celsius? Now remember, when you are converting, you're going by what you are changing it to. So this one should be the C equals, because they've already given us the Fahrenheit. We are now converting to Celsius. All right, so you should have 5/9, right, times parentheses F minus 32. Okay, so 5/9, because C is always going to be smaller than Fahrenheit, times, and then the parentheses that tells us we have to subtract first, F minus 32. Okay. So that being the case, what would be the formula for converting from Celsius to Fahrenheit? Because we are going to Fahrenheit, that formula is going to start with F. F equals, because we already know what Celsius gives, has been given to us when we're converting to Fahrenheit. So that should be your C equals 9/5, because Fahrenheit will always be bigger, times C, and then plus 32. So remember, the parentheses aren't here, so we're going to multiply first and then add as the last step. So now that we've gone over that formula before we look at other formulas, go ahead and test your work on converting this one. If we have 38 degrees Celsius, what is that going to convert to in the Fahrenheit scale? Go ahead and work that out, and then unpause the video as we go over the answer. All right, now this will all make sense if you've remembered the fact that 37 degrees Celsius is the boiling point of water, and so is 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So once we've calculated this, I erased it a little, we've got 9/5 times C plus 32, right? Because we're converting to Fahrenheit. So Fahrenheit equals 9/5 times Celsius, which they gave us, plus 32. So we change it into fractions where we're going to multiply. There's no cross canceling we can do here, unfortunately. So we multiply 9/5 times 38 over 1, which gives us 342 over 5. We can simplify that to 68 2/5 plus 32, which is going to be 102/5, not close enough to make us round up to 101. So it's about, squiggly, it's about 100. We always round to the closest whole degree. 2/5 is not over half, so it's not enough to bump it up to 101. So 38 degrees Celsius, about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Hopefully you remember that. Let's go over some other formulas, because you are going to use them as well. Do you remember formula for area of a square? Should be side squared or side times side. Okay. How about area of a rectangle? Just length times width. That one's an easy one. A equals length times width. Perimeter of a square. Yes, I messed this one up on your test because I was like, do I want to use square or do I want to use rectangle? And I put area of a square, perimeter of a square, and then the choice or option was the formula for rectangle. So I took one of each. Fix that. This, perimeter of a square, 4 times S. All right, perimeter of a rectangle. I'm trying to read backwards as well. Remember, this is the one where we do double the length plus double the width. How about area of a triangle? 1/2 times base times height. Remember, with triangle, yes, we have base times height like we would with a parallelogram, but we have to cut it in half. And it doesn't matter if we want to cut the base in half and then multiply by the height, or cut the height in half and multiply by the base, or multiply them both and then cut it in half. The important part is that we cut it something in half one time, just once. We don't do it all the time. You know, we don't do half of the base times half of the height. That won't work. All right, area of a parallelogram. Hey, we just went over base times height. Okay. If you remember, this formula deals with circumference of a circle. All right, pi times diameter. Diameter is a long word. Circumference is a long word. Diameter is the longer measurement. That's what we want to use. And if they give us a radius, we're going to have to double it. Okay, so pi times diameter, circumference of a circle. Okay. How about the area of a circle? That's the one where it's pi r squared. Okay, radius is the small measurement, area is the small word. Okay, so we want to make sure we do the area times, or the radius times itself, then times pi. Pi times the radius squared. Okay, do you remember this? We worked on this yesterday. Told you the redneck version, I equals purdy, right? So we've got I equals P times R times T, I equals PRT. What do these mean? I, we're finding the simple interest. P is the principal, the amount borrowed. R is rate, what is the percentage rate at which you're charged interest? And then T, time. And that's always done in years when we're talking about time. So today, as we look in, how then would we calculate it when we've been given months instead of years as our time frame? We're going to have to make it in a fraction out of a year. So look on page 289. And let's start going over this. Interest by month. So look at the fact. It says if an annual interest rate is given, then the time in the simple interest formula is expressed in terms of years. All right, so it's a whole number. Okay. Assume that the interest rate is an annual one unless otherwise stated. Okay, so if they give it to us in months, we still need to express it in years. Now, yesterday we did work on half a year. That would be 6 months. And we still had to express it as, what is that as a year? Well, it was 0.5. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing when we have a month's time frame into our simple interest formula. If you look at the example, Mr. Nichols borrows $3,000 at 15% rate of interest for 3 months. Okay, your principal is $3,000. That's what he borrowed. His rate, 15%, which we would change to 0.15. And then time. Well, it's 3 months out of the year. So how would we express that in terms of a year? Well, 3 out of 12 months, or 1/4. And you could also convert it to 0.15 if you wanted to as well. All right, so if you're noticing in part 1, we're going to convert all of these months into what fraction of a year it would be, and that's what you would use as your time frame when you are multiplying for interest. So for example, 1 month would be how much out of the year? It would be 1/12. So that first blank, 1 month, is 1/12 of a year. So you're writing it in terms of how much of a year is it, because your time in those formulas is years. So 2 months would be what? Well, yes, it'd be 2 out of 12 months. Simplify it, 1/6. Okay, do you see how we're going with this? So how about 3 months, which we just did in the yellow up above? 1/4. Okay, because 3/12 simplifies to 1/4 of a year. So 4 months would be what? 4/12 or 1/3. Hopefully this is picking up now. 5 months. You can't simplify it. It's simply 5/12. 5 months is 5/12 of a year. 6 months, half of a year. 7 months, 7/12 of a year. 8 months. You should have 2/3 of a year because 8 over 12 simplifies to 2 over 3. How about 9 months? You should have 3/4 of a year because 9 over 12 simplifies to 3/4. And then 10 months, 5/6 of a year. Of course, 11 months would be 11/12, but they don't have that on there. And 12 months, you should recognize that would be 12 over 12, which makes 1. That would be 1 year. Okay, so if you're looking at using that in a simple interest formula, let's do a couple practice ones up on the board. Ooh, sorry for making that shape so badly. Let's get this down there a little bit. All right, so if we have $4,500 at 9.5% for 6 months. Now we know, of course, that we're multiplying our principal times our rate times our time. But this has to be expressed in terms of years. Now 6 months we know is 6 out of 12 or half. So we could do 4,500. Wow, this marker is awful. Let's try a better one. Okay. 4,500, there we go, times, we could do the rate first and then the year in terms of months, or we could do the year first, which I'm going to do. That's going to be an easy one. A half is 0.5. That's easy to put in decimal form. All right, so 0, 0, 5 times 5. And, of course, we don't forget our decimal point. So now we're at $2,250 times our interest rate, okay? 0.095, because this would be 9.5%, and we need to make it its true decimal form. So 5 times 0, you should be doing this along with me, 2, 12, and 11. All right, now let's multiply by the 9. So we have 0, 45, 18 plus 4 is 22, 18 plus 2 is 20. It's going to start to run into my other problem. All right, 0, 5, 7, 3, 1. That was a little crooked. And of course, we need to make sure we've got our decimal point in the right place. We do not put 213.750. We are talking about money and how much interest. So we always need to put it to the nearest cent. So in this case, $213.75 is what would be paid in simple interest for this problem. Okay? So the next one, we've got our principal, our rate, and then our time. Again, we've got to convert this time into terms of years. So when we're talking about years, 2 months out of 12 months would be 1/6 of a year. Okay? So there's our formula, 1/6 of a year. Now, I can go ahead and multiply these two and then this, or I'm going to get rid of this fraction first and multiply it like this. Okay. Why? Because I can already tell these two I'm going to be able to cross cancel. It's going to make things much simpler. I can divide by 3, and that would be 500. Okay, I see I can cross cancel again and divide by 2 and get 250. So when I multiply, because when you're multiplying 3 things, it doesn't matter the order, right? 5 times 3 is 3 times 5. So I can multiply my time and my principal before I do the rate. It's up to you. I think this is much easier because now I've got a nice $250 simple number to multiply times my interest rate percentage, which of course we change to a decimal. 6 times 0, 6 times 5, 6 times 2 plus 3. I have 2 decimal points, decimal places. Here we go. My simple interest, in this case, for 2 months, at this rate, on this amount of principal, would be $15. When you are solving things like this, you're simply going to calculate using that fraction, or if it's easily converted into a decimal like half, 0.5, use that for the time. So if we look at these problems, let's look at the story problems together. Number 2, it says Dr. Henry bought a refrigerator for $1,250. He paid $450 down, and then he agreed to pay the remainder in 6 months at 18% rate of interest. Find the total cost. So we've got a couple things that we need to do here. Your principal is not $1,250. Why? Because that's not what he took the loan out on or agreed to pay interest on. Notice he paid $450 down. When you make a down payment, that comes off of the price because you're paying that up front. You don't have to pay interest on that. So go ahead and calculate $1,250 minus $450. That's going to be the amount that will be your principal. Okay, so when you subtracted that, you got your answer. So $1,250 minus $450, you should have $800. Okay, so $800 is now the principal amount. That's what you would circle if you saw that any problem as far as your PRT. So $800. Why? Because you already paid $450 of it. All right, so $800 is the principal times 18% rate. That would be 0.18. What is your time? Notice you've got 6 months. So you should have 0.5 or 1/2. So go ahead and multiply now. 800 times 0.18 times 0.5. All right, did you find your simple interest? If you still didn't yet, you can still pause and come back when you're finished. All right, you should have come up with your interest. Now you have to add that to the $1,250 because he's going to pay that cost for sure because that is the price of his refrigerator. Now when you add the interest in, the question says, what is the total cost of the refrigerator? Go ahead and add that, what you found as the interest, to the original cost of the refrigerator. Not just to the principal, to the entire cost. Okay, you should have $1,322. His interest was not quite $100. Even though he paid the $450 down, he's still going to have to pay it. So the cost, $1,250 for the refrigerator, plus the interest that we solved based on what he financed, $800 times 0.18 times half a year. All right, problem B, Olivia Mills borrowed $5,800 from the bank for 3 months at 15% rate of interest. How much money does she have to repay? Again, we're finding the interest, but we're putting that together with what she borrowed to find out what is the whole amount she's really going to have to pay because she borrowed the amount. All right, so we're going to multiply 5,800 times what rate? 0.15 times 3 months. How will we express that? You should know that's 1/4 of the year. So 3 months would be times 1/4, or you can change it to the decimal and do 0.25. Go ahead and multiply. All right, pause if you need to. All right, when you come back, you should have found the interest now. You add that together with the $5,800 to find out her total. Go ahead and do that now if you did not do it already. Okay, when you add it together, you should get $6,017.50 is the total amount that she's going to repay because she borrowed $5,800. But she's got to pay $217.50 as her interest. So that has to be added into the total. $6,017.50 is the total amount she's going to repay. All right, so section 2 is asking us to find the total overall with what they borrowed or with what they financed. Section 3, you are only finding the interest. We don't have to add to it to find the total for these ones. So just like we did on the board, we didn't add that $213.75 back to the $4,500, which we would if they asked us to find the total amount paid. All right, we simply found the interest. Same thing here. $15 was the interest. We didn't then add it to this because they weren't asking for the total amount paid, just the interest. So like these on the board, that's what you're doing for section 3 in your book. Okay, so notice you've got rates at 6 months for A, B is 2 months, C is 3 years. Don't make a fraction. Whenever they give you years, you just use that whole number. So watch out. Are they giving you months or are they giving you years? Because they will slip them in there to make sure you're paying attention. D, 3 months now. That's different. You're going to have to make that a fraction out of a year. E, 8 months, and then F, 11 months. So when you're multiplying that principal times that rate times that time, remember you need to put it as out of years, not just, hey, it's 6 months, so times 6. You don't want to pay that much interest. I will not come to a bank that would do that. All right, number 4. On the next page, you are converting. You've got Celsius to Fahrenheit. So because it's Fahrenheit that's blank, you want to use the formula that starts with F equals. Some of you were doing it backwards last week. B, 68 degrees Fahrenheit converts Celsius. Since Celsius is blank, you want to use the formula that starts with C equals, because that's what you're trying to find out, what it equals. And then C again converting to Fahrenheit. Section 5, write the formulas. Get used to writing them without the multiplication symbols in between. Okay, write it the way that we learned without the little X or without the dots. How do we write those formulas? Get used to seeing them that way. That's going to help you in future. Cross off number 6. We didn't learn how to draw with a compass since we've been in this whole homebound situation. Section 7, complete the time zone chart. Easy peasy. And section 8, follow the directions. Please read carefully. You might want to pay attention and go back and review how we write prime factors of 36. That's where we did the factor tree and broke it down. And notice it says use exponents if needed. So make sure you're going to use those exponents. And that's it for lesson 160. So that was interest by months, but we're still using the interest formula. Of course, we don't use the X's, we just do PRT. So make sure you are working carefully. Show your work, okay? Because I do need to see that to give you full credit. And we'll see you next time. Have a good day.